Hello, students. My name is Mr. Thompson, and my highly qualified colleagues are Armando Gutierrez and Kelvin Wong. We are here to teach you about Chapter 15 and 18. Yours truly will be beginning with Chapter 15, Developing Positive Self-Concepts for the first third of this presentation, while the second two-thirds will be on Chapter 18, Direct Instruction. Coincidentally, what I am using primarily because it lends itself well to Zoom. My audience here is prospective secondary teachers as well as students. All right, we do both. I will be summarizing and explaining Chapter 15. This initial stage will be comprised of 9 slides on Google Doc, as you can see here, or Google Slides, and it will be accompanied by a worksheet. And the worksheet is available, and it looks something like this. It's 1 page long, and you can copy and use it online, or of course, print it out if you like. Now, obviously, we have the visual Google Slides as mentioned earlier, and we also have a transcript of the audio. So it's not exactly word for word from what I'm saying, of course, but it's pretty good, and it gives you a nice overview of everything that we're going to be going over today. Now, embedded in the worksheet are 2 quick writes. So pausing the video will be needed so that you can perform them. The worksheet is roughly in chronological order, so it would behoove you to keep it handy. And you can always use, as mentioned before, paper version or online, fill it out. And of course, shortly I will begin with some information related to students' potential and drive for self-actualization. Then I will dive into a plethora of information regarding teachers and particular personality traits that should be avoided and others that should be garnered. Without further ado, here we go. Now, chapter 15 is, we're going to begin here with a paraphrase of Charles Eliot's quote: "The vast majority of us, humans, possess the remarkable potential for learning, and that individual differences in intellect are not as such importance as to warrant the designing of special and separate programs to accommodate. The varied environments and teaching modalities will do the job." Now, this idea was tailored toward tracking in schools, but nonetheless sets the scene for students being much more alike than different and capable to uncanny degrees. Now, in education, we have a bell-shaped curve, right? Meaning there is a small minority of students that need special treatment. That is both on the low and high ends of the spectrum. But as Mr. Eliot professed, the vast majority of students may learn slightly differently by degree, but they learn nonetheless. Right, so on our worksheet, if you're following along, we have a quick write here. Now, I would like you to engage in the quick write for, say, 5 to 10 minutes on the topic of tracking in schools, facts and feelings, and or your thoughts on various teaching strategies that you may implement in your own discipline to try and reach every student. Now, you may pause the recording here to do so. Wonderful. I'm glad you're back. We are now moving on to slide 4. Now, in chapter 15, developing positive self-concepts, finding your inner self and potentially learning how to practice in self-actualization, as you can tell, Maslow's highest level, is the chapter's main focus, right? So students can accelerate their ability to learn and perform by, coincidentally, learning and gaining skills. This process can be of exponential growth that lies on a positive feedback loop where learning potentiates future learning, right? It builds upon itself. Now, learning is affected, of course, by the social climate and environment you're in, and what a mighty web they weave with the school-provided curriculum, right? We also need to be aware of the self and how it is to reach out into the world and reciprocally contribute to and profit from transactions with it. Now, if I can garner your attention to the two unverified quotes above Maslow's hierarchy of needs, one reads, "We are all employees of the world as we giveth and taketh from it." As was just previously stated, that students and people in general should have a reciprocal relationship with learning, school and community, right? Giving and taking. The second quote, "You must actively resist entropy because it actively draws upon you," meaning students constantly have opposing forces that one needs to consciously resist with the ultimate goal of striving for self-actualization. We're going to move on to slide 5. Now, with all that said about the student, it is the teacher that is dissected most in this chapter. The authors point to conceptual systems theory, CST, which turns out to be a useful predictor of teacher-student interaction and a teacher's aptitude, ability, or fitness to acquire the competence to use teaching skills and strategies. Now, this form of growth, as does much personal growth, it coincides with personality, self-concept, and psychological maturity. Now, it comes in seem to engage in 3 primary types of professional growth, termed, as we can see here, formal, peer-generated, and personal domains. The formal domain spanned from attending only activities sponsored by the district to effectively exploiting the opportunities far and wide. Right? Those are vastly different, right? So between those in search of professional growth, right? Possessing a growth mindset, and those who don't believe knowing more will enhance their teaching abilities, right? A fixed mindset, or just don't care. But please understand, most teachers fall somewhere in between. It is that pesky bell-shaped curve once again. Now, the second term is that of peer-generated. Now, that's ranging from having nearly no professional discussions with other faculty to persons who had close and even mentoring relationships with other faculty, to individuals going above and beyond by instigating the introduction of innovations or initiatives for the improvement of the school. So try and be the latter rather than the former, right? Practice what you preach and be encouraging and optimistic rather than, of course, pessimistic or being what they have deemed negative Nancy, right, within the faculty. So rounding out the domains is the personal domain, and it refers to off-the-job involvement in non-compensated activities, right? What you pretty much do on your own or you're not going to get paid for. So here are more active people. They viewed the environment as an array of possibilities, right? It's kind of like at their whim. Now, the less active individuals were either unaware there were possibilities or indifferent to them. For these individuals, it is imperative for peer-generated involvement because that may be the only way to get them to act, right? This may also generate a colleagueship with one another that can perpetuate future and further involvement and continue to produce growth in individuals. Now, as you can see as number 4 here, as a personal anecdote, this is me, right? I am a less socially active person, especially outside of school and work. I'm a homebody, and I only go out when my family and friends coax me out, right? I am either at home, school, or the gym. Luckily for me and others like me nowadays, we can use technology to access a wealth of knowledge from home or anywhere, and probably in the world for that matter. But it is still good to have rich and consistent social interaction, right? That can't be understated. We got to keep that in mind. Social interaction is key, as we know in teaching, and of course, because of Corona, right? So this is slide 7. Now, interwoven with the previous domains are levels of activity. There are 3 primary levels. The first and most ambitious is that of gourmet omnivore. It's a pretty cool name there. These individuals delve into many realms. They participate with others. They have a habit of both exploiting and enriching whatever environment they're in. There is a versatility and flexibility to them. But of course, this is only roughly 10 to 15% of people. Now, moving down the hierarchy to the second level, which is where most of us reside, it is known as a passive consumer. They are not against anything, but don't strive for change. They mainly stick with what is required of them unless provoked by peers, right? Of course, within the peer generated or personal domains. Now, at the bottom level, there on the right, is the reticent consumer. They actively push away opportunities for growth. They have a pessimistic view, believing nothing changes for the better. They are not able to take ownership, and therefore plenty of excuses for why they don't get things done are created, right? These are the teachers you wish were not in the profession, because it is embarrassing, right, at the least, and harmful to students' future at the worst. So don't become the poster boy or girl or other for the reticent consumer, right? That would be a bad thing to do. Now, moving on to slide 8, we have uh, some help here with becoming a gourmet omnivore in each of the 3 domains, right? So we have the formal, the peer generated, and personal, developing a strong self-concept and accompanying that with self-actualization behavior. In other words, being all you can be. That's the Army slogan, huh? Here are a few people you may be able to draw motivation from if needed. And we have some listed there, which I'll read in just a second. But don't settle or think you are a finely tuned machine with no room or need to grow. Live up to your title through impression and modeling. What aspects are important? Some of us may fake it till we make it, but that modeling of developing richer states of growth will pay off, not only for your peers and yourself, but your students year after year. Now, if we look at a few of these quotes quickly, that top one is Inky Johnson, and it says, "Commitment is staying true to what you said you would do long after the mood you said it in has left." Right, that's pretty deep. And his second one is, "People get upset not because of the adversity they face, but because their adversity reveals who they truly are." Pretty good as well. Now, of course, we have Jocko Willink is there, Les Brown, Jim Rohn, Eric Thomas. I'm just going to finish here with the quote of David Goggins. And he says, "I don't stop when I'm tired, I stop when I'm done." And everybody comes to a point in their life when they want to quit, but it is what you do in that moment that determines who you are. Now you can definitely pause the video here and read the other quotes if you would like. They are awesome in my opinion, of course, and I did pick them. And we're gonna be moving on to number 9. All right. Now here, of course, you can see it says quick write. So all of the information you provide on the worksheet will allow me to gauge our competency on this information and what, if anything, needs to be elaborated upon. So if you could pause the video here in just a moment to perform this quick write again for about 5 to 10 minutes. There's no word count necessary or anything, but the quick write is, ask yourself which one of these categories, gourmet omnivore, passive consumer, reticent consumer, within domains, formal, peer generated, and personal, you find yourself in currently, right? So it could be a combination of each. You're not gourmet omnivore necessarily in each category, right? You can, in each domain, it could be different. So if you do not find yourself currently not at the upper echelon level, ask yourself why not, and then provide some ideas that can put you in search of a better you. If you are already a gourmet omnivore with active elements in formal, peer-generated, and personal domains, please provide some examples that back up that claim, right? I need some proof. I need some references there, right? So I will be awaiting your responses. Thank you for paying attention. So chapter 15 has now come to a close, and we will move on to chapter 18 in just a second.
Hello, everyone. My name is Armando Gutierrez, and I will be covering the first half of chapter 18. Thank you, Matt, for covering chapter 15. Very well done. So let's get on with chapter 18. So chapter 18 is direct instruction. So what is direct instruction? Direct instruction is a model for teaching that emphasizes well-developed and carefully planned lessons designed around small learning increments and clearly defined and prescribed teaching tasks. So direct instruction also involves a high level of teacher control and direction. It occurs when the teacher selects and directs the learning tasks, maintains a central role during instruction, and minimizes the amount of non-academic pupil talk. So what are the goals of direct instruction? There are two major goals. The first one being maximization of student learning time, and the second being the development of independence in seeking and educational goals. So what do those mean? Many teacher behaviors found to be associated with student achievement are in fact associated with student time on task and student rate of success, which in turn are associated with student achievement. Thus, the behaviors incorporated into direct instruction are designed to create a structured, academically oriented learning environment in which students are actively engaged during instruction and are experiencing a high rate of success, usually 80% mastery or better in the tasks that they are given. The direct instruction environment is one in which there is a predominant focus on learning and in which students are engaged in academic tasks a large percentage of the time and achieve it at a high rate of success. The social climate is usually positive and free of negative effect. So moving on. So rationales for using direct instruction. It enables teachers to focus on students' knowledge. What does that mean? It allows teachers to identify and focus on what students know, what they don't understand yet, and where they need additional practice or support. When done well, students are grouped based on their skill level rather than their grade level. Students will work closely with an instructor and have multiple opportunities to practice and demonstrate mastery of a skill before they are moved to a higher level group. This allows students to learn at their level and instructors to monitor closely where each student is in relation to their learning target. Second rationale, direct instruction is efficient. One of the strengths of direct instruction is obviously its efficiency. In a physical education classroom, there might be, for example, 3 groups of students working on 3 different skills, and it ensures that each student is working at their level simultaneously as their peers. Students know the target that they are trying to hit. When they demonstrate they are ready to move on, they are allowed to go on to the next skill level. Because the activity is neither too hard nor too easy, and because the learning targets are clearly identified, students stay engaged and are progressing. When students understand the objective and maintain it, their confidence will grow and they're encouraged to keep progressing. The direct instruction method also gives PE teachers the opportunity to explain rules, regulations, objectives, and different parts of a movement or skills to students verbally, which installs an idea in their head of what to expect. Another rationale would be it approaches academic content systematically. Its design is shaped to generate and sustain motivation through pacing and reinforcement. Through success and positive feedback, it will also try to enhance self-esteem as well. So direct instruction is very structured. Students are actively engaged during instruction and are successful if done properly. Direct instruction is designed to create a structured, academically oriented learning environment in which students are actively engaged during instruction and are experiencing a high rate of success, 80% or better, like we mentioned before, in the tasks that they are given. Also, direct instruction can improve engagement. So you can improve engagement in the classroom by, for example, using introductory activities that elicit student relevant existing knowledge structures, such as reviewing the previous day's work or discussing the objective of the lesson, providing clear, explicit directions about the work that's going to be done, also telling the students about the materials they will use and the activities they will be engaged in during the lesson, and also providing an overview of the lesson will help. Lastly, direct instruction will help facilitate learning. It could be very useful when it comes to facilitating learning through the use of presentation practices. Some examples would include presenting material in small steps so that one point can be mastered at a time, providing many varied examples of new skills or concepts, modeling or giving narrated demonstrations of the learning tasks, and also avoiding digressions, staying on topic, and re-explaining any difficult points that the students might have. Moving on. So there are varying levels of practice functions depending on the students. It is broken down into 3 levels. The first level, it describes the students are first introduced to a new skill or concept, and then the teacher will lead the group through each step in working out the problem. This first level, this first idea will ensure that few errors are produced in the initial learning stages when memory is most vulnerable to remembering incorrect practice and when errors reinforce incorrect information. All right, so that's the first level. Once they're able to move to the second level, um, after the highly structured practice in the first level, the students will practice on their own while the teacher monitors. During this time, the teacher will provide any corrective feedback for any errors produced, as well as reinforcement for correct practice. When students are able to practice with accuracy, they are ready for independent practice. That is for practice under conditions when assistance is not available. Homework would be an example of independent practice. So that's the second level. Once they're ready to move on to the third level is the mastery level. So students are performing the skill with minimal error. So research indicates that on the whole, the more a person practices a skill, the longer it takes them to forget it. This creates the practice meaningful since it is retained for a long period of time. So these are the levels of direct instruction, first, second, and third level. Okay, so these are examples of direct instruction. Go ahead and take this time to watch this video of Matt showing a demonstration of the deadlift.
Good day, students. We will be going over a tutorial on the deadlift. As you can see here, I have a bar set up. Okay. And we are going to use the 5-step approach. So first step is going to be setting the bar over my midfoot. Now we're going to do a conventional deadlift as well, not a sumo. So just like that, the bar is over my midfoot, possibly over my laces or where I tie them. Next, I'm going to set this down. Set the bar over my midfoot. I'm going to bend over and I'm going to grab the bar just wider than my legs. When I pull the bar up my thigh, I don't want my hand to be rubbing on my thigh, right? I don't want it to be rubbing here. I want it to be just outside of my legs, okay? So set my bar over my midfoot. I bend over, I grab the bar. Number 3, I'm going to take my shins to the bar, right? So my tibia. So I bend my knees more to get my tibia to touch the bar. That's number 3. Number 4 is I'm going to breathe in and I'm going to set my back and rotate my arms to push into my side so you can't tickle my armpits, okay? So I breathe in, chest out, tuck my arms, and now I draw the bar up my body. Okay? And then I just reverse on the way down. I go hips, 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 knees. Okay? Set my back, drag the bar up my body. We can squeeze our backside to the top, our glutes. Keep it nice and tight. My shoulder should be slightly in front of the bar for almost everybody. Hopefully that works out for you. I appreciate you watching. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. So as you can see, this was a example of direct instruction. Why? Because Matt clearly stated 5 steps, and before you could move on to the next step, you had to complete the prior step. So in this case, students would know what the steps are, what the objective is, and what they have to do to move on to the next step before they can complete the entire skill. Okay, so this next example is it's a YouTube video of a physical education teacher and a coach who is teaching handball, and he's giving a lesson on direct instruction. It's about a minute long. Let's go ahead and watch that.
So the direct instruction approach involves the coaches designing a series of drills, skill drills, in this case, handballing skill drills using the Crazy Catch net. So Brent Harvey is practicing his handball. Now, the coach will open the skill drills up as the player or the players progress their skills. So it's a very fast way to develop skills in the early stages. But as you can see, the skills aren't necessarily performed in a game-sensed environment. They're very isolated and can become boring and repetitive. So that is direct instruction coaching, where the coach determines the drills and the players do the drills.
So as you can see, that is a form of direct instruction. Obviously in PE, you don't want to go straight into playing a game. You want to teach skills necessary to be able to to play the game. So there might be days where students are only going to focus on skills and they won't be able to move on to the next skill before obtaining mastery in that previous skill. So these are examples of direct instruction in physical education. I'm going to hand it over to Kelvin, who will show another example and also complete the second half of this chapter. Thank you very much.
Hi class, my name is Kelvin Wong, and now we'll be going into our next direct instruction example in math. Hi class, my name is Mr. Wong, and today we'll be discussing fractions. Specifically, we're going to be discussing how to add fractions. But first, we need to know what is a fraction. So a fraction is a number, any number, over another number. And this could also be a number divided by another number. But we'll get into that part, the dividing part, later on in the semester. But for now, it's just any number on top of another number. So in a fraction, there are two components: the numerator, which is the top number, and the denominator, which is the bottom number. This is very important to know the distinction, so I highly advise you guys writing it down. So in this fraction, the numerator is 1 and the denominator is 2. So in other examples, 7 over 9, 9 is the denominator and 7 is the numerator. And for this example, 3 is the numerator and 5 is the denominator. So now we're going to get into how to add fractions. So when you're adding fractions, the first thing we need to know is, are the denominators the same? That is the only way you can add fractions. You cannot add fractions when they look something like this, where the denominators are different. We cannot add them, but we can learn how to add them later on. So in this case, 4 is the denominator in both cases, so we can add it. But when we're adding, the denominator stays the same once both of the fractions, the denominators are the exact same, it stays the same when you're answering it. So in this case, you would add across from 3 to 6, and that's 9, and be over 4. We are not adding 4 plus 4 like the top numbers. 3 plus 6, we added those. But in this case, 4, it just stays the same. So the answer in this case would be 3 plus 6 is 9 over 4. So once you get the common denominator, it stays the same at the end of the problem when you're answering. So, like we mentioned earlier, we cannot add if they do not have the same denominator. So we have to try to find the least common denominator in both the fractions so that we can properly add them. And the reason why we need to find the least common denominator is because it makes it easier for us in the future and it saves a lot more work. So in this case, the least common denominator for 2 and 3 would be 6. But they both go into 18. That is not the least common denominator. The least common denominator is 6. So if we made it to 18, it would just mean more multiplication, more math, and more work. So we always try to find the least common denominator. So in this case, it'd be 6. So now what do? We found the least common denominator, but now we have to apply it. So we have to make each fraction have the bottom number be 6, the least common denominator. So in this fraction, we'll be multiplying the top and the bottom term by 2. And in this fraction, we'll be multiplying the top and the bottom term by 3. So in this case, it'd be 2 times 2 equals 4 divided over 3 times 2 equals 6. And then it'd be 3 times 3 equals 9 over 3 times 2 equals 6. So then they would both these fractions would have a denominator of 6. And then you would add straight across. And remember, the denominator stays the same. So in this case, what would the least common denominator be? It would be 20 in this case. So to get to 20, we'd have to multiply this fraction by 4, the top and the bottom number, and then this fraction by 5. So now I'm going to give you guys practice problems to do on your own. And I'll be going around in the class to make sure you guys are doing it properly. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. So remember, we have to find the least common denominator first, and then we can add straight across. So these are the problems you guys will be doing. And in some cases, you will have the number be greater than the denominator, and that's okay. Later on in this class, we're gonna this is called an improper fraction. We are going to be reducing this to a mixed number, looking something like this. You can see, oh, sorry. As you guys can see, it looks something like this. But for now, we're just adding, so if the numerator is bigger than the denominator, that is okay. Later on in the class, we're going to be learning how to reduce that. So please work on those problems. And in this case, I would in a real class setting, I would give them more problems to do, and more interaction between when introducing a new topic. So, and then I would have problems set up to reduce improper fractions to mixed numbers, and then I would go to in-depth explanation on what is an improper fraction and a mixed number, and this will segue into my next lesson, which would be subtracting fractions. So they would already have hopefully mastery of adding fractions, find the least common denominator in the fractions, and then reducing improper fractions to mixed numbers to hopefully have them successfully transition to subtracting fractions. And for their homework, I would implement all these in their homework, which is adding fractions and then reducing the fraction, if it is an improper fraction, to mixed numbers. So thank you guys for listening.
All righty, so let's get back to the next slide. So that is an example of a direct instruction in the math example. So as you can see, there was in-depth review of the material, very detailed. Students are just listening to me lecture and then they are practicing on their own. So that is an example of direct instruction in math. So we are going to, move on to the next slide. So now we're going to be talking about some commentary on various aspects of the model. So it's very important to establish a learning environment where there is an academic focus, a high degree of teacher direction and control, high expectations for students' progress, and a system for managing time when implementing effective direct instruction. So when it comes to academic focus, this means the student places the highest priority on the assignment and the completion of academic tasks. Teachers should create an academic focus and avoid negative practices as criticisms of student behavior. So another thing that is important is establishing the next bulletin point is establishing a framework for the lesson. Before presenting and explaining new material, it is helpful to establish a framework for the lesson and orient the students to the new material. So the next bulletin point is teacher's initial explanation. Student success in learning the new material has much to do with the thoroughness and quality of the teacher's initial explanation. So that is why it is very important for the initial explanation to be thorough, concise, and simple for the students to understand. The next bulletin point, it says ensuring that all students get a chance to respond, not just those who raise their hand or calls out the right answer. This can be accomplished by calling on students in a pattern order or randomized through a random generator app or by pulling names out of a cup so that all students have opportunities to share their knowledge, to show their knowledge of the material. And the next bulletin point, important to probe for clarification and improved answers. This is important because sometimes it's not very clear on if they understand it, and you really need to try to engage all students to make sure that most of the class knows how to do it, the thing properly or understands the material properly. So we'll move on to the next slide. Now we're going to be discussing some 5 phases of activity in direct instruction. So phase 1 is orientation. The teacher's expectations are communicated, the learning task is clarified, and the student accountability is established. Phase 2, the presentation. The teacher explains the new concept or skill and provides demonstrations and examples. Phase 3, structured practice. The teacher leads the students through practice examples, working through each step. Phase 4, guided practice, gives the students the opportunity to practice on their own with support. And phase 5, independent practice. Students practice on their own without assistance and delayed feedback. So as you can see in my example in math, most of these phases were addressed in the example. Structured practice wasn't really addressed, but it would have been addressed if it was in a real life lesson that would have been like 50 minutes long. But definitely guided practice was there, and independent practice would have been their homework given too. So let's move on to the next slide. And so now we're going to be discussing some pros of direct instruction. So one of the first pro that I'm going to talk about is it's very structured and has clear lesson plans. And this enables it to be administered by anyone depending on the lesson plan and how the teacher demonstrates the information, because some teachers may have the bulk of their information done only verbally, straight from their memory, whereas other teachers like to have them presented in a PowerPoint slide. I feel like it's effective to have the major points in a PowerPoint slide, so the main concepts are seen visually and explained verbally from the teacher. So another pro, it keeps the students' engagement high. Since it's highly structured, there is no time and no opportunity for non-academic questions being asked during instruction, which ends up keeping the students on task. A good tip when it comes to direct instruction is to, during the actual lesson itself, is to save questions to the end, depending on your subject matter, but to keep the flow of the learning for the students there. But if you think there's a proper break in the instruction, then you could pause and then ask questions to make sure they're clarified on each step, so they're not confused. So it actually depends on the teacher and the structure of the lesson. So now we'll be talking about some cons of direct instruction. So it should not be used all the time, even though it is used a lot, especially in structures like physical education. It should not be used all the time for all educational objectives or for all students, because all students learn differently. So they need to be engaged in different matters than just direct instruction. For some content or some students, teaching may need to be done in other ways to get the most out of this content or the student. So it's all individualized, but at the end of the day, it shouldn't be used for all students and for all circumstances. So another con is to truly make sure the students understand the content. A common error is simply to ask students if they understand or have any questions, and then to assume that if no one or only a few students respond, everyone understands well enough to move on. That's not necessarily the case. Some students are more shy than others. So you really need to try to give direct questions so that you can make sure that they really understand the content, so you can move on to the next part of the lesson. And another con of direct instruction is reviewing the information. Some teachers deal with the topic and never review the information or skills again until the final exam. So the important material needs to be reviewed regularly so the students have better retention. So this is our conclusion of our presentation. In a real setting, we would ask these questions to the class so they could to test their knowledge, to see what they learn. So obviously we're not doing that, but I will go over these questions real quickly. So the first question, can anyone tell me how direct instruction is used? Question 2, what is one example of direct instruction? Question 3, what is the goal of direct instruction? And question 4, when is direct instruction appropriate? So this concludes our presentation, and thank you so much.